3, 4.
We just live right now, man. It's going down, excited for the season. You know, we coming off a playoff win. I mean, you know, we had a couple wins.
Hello, and welcome to Deer Diaries, a Milwaukee Bucks podcast presented by us, the staff of Brew Hoop. My name is Riley Feldman, one of your usual co-hosts. Happy to be joined by another, we'll call him a semi-regular co-host. He made a number of appearances in his maiden voyage with the site. It's Brew Hoop's Jackson Gross. Jackson, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a very full just summer and now end of summer at this point, especially now. I'm back tutoring at my old high school. If you couldn't tell, we talked about a pre-show, but I am now a volunteer assistant coach for my old cross country team as well. So getting back into that, I'm enjoying that a lot. It was kind of cool today. I was walking through the hallways and I saw one of the guys and he's like, "Oh, what's up, coach?" I'm like, it made me so happy. It was like the first time last year someone called me Mr. Gross as a tutor. It's like, I'm gaining the respect and I love it. So
Okay, good.
Things are great.
Good. We when Mitchell Maurer was on a couple of podcasts ago, I asked him about his coaching philosophy. He coaches his son's youth basketball teams. I'll ask you real quick. I mean, you know, I'm sure they don't have you running the entire program, but are you a bit of a hard ass? Are you easygoing? What's your coaching style? Since as the volunteer assistant coach, what's your coaching style look like?
I go a little mix of things. I'm usually fairly laid back, but I will call out guys for certain things. Like today, we were on the football field because the track is there too, and we want the guys to be stretching. And it's a very young team, no juniors on the team, a few seniors. And this one guy's just picking at the grass and the pellets and the turf. And I'm like, I didn't know pellet picking was a stretch and all that kind of stuff. So I'll be humorous about when I call guys out. But I will get serious from time to time if it's necessary. Like yesterday they ran a workout and some of the guys were running slower in each rep, or I'm just also trying to gain a coaching voice, all that kind of stuff. So, but I would say I'm about a 50-50 mix.
Okay. And you're enjoying it so far? I don't know how long you've been doing, but you're enjoying the experience?
Let's see. This was my 5th practice.
Okay. A couple under your belt then.
So, I'm absolutely enjoying it.
Cool. It seems to me, I mean, I was talking with Mitchell. I'm not a coach or anything, but I know a little bit more about volleyball than some of the newer players on the team. And it's enjoyable, like instructing them, having people kind of look to you as like, oh, they kind of know what they're doing. Like there are expectations that go with this, but it's enjoyable when you feel like you're actually helping somebody else get something down. So that's really cool that you'll have the opportunity to do that. You have to keep us tuned as to how the team does throughout the season. So keep that in the mind. We'll add that alongside Jackson's build as Jackson's coaching corner as well.
Yeah, they have a big invite tomorrow. It's usually the big first invite of the year. 17 teams, I think, are going to be there. So should be fun tomorrow.
Awesome. Well, we wish them luck, and we're going to get to the podcast now. Why is Jackson here? He is here because we are doing our season preview series here on Deer Diaries. We're doing a series of interviews from Brew Hoop and beyond, including the fine folks at Locked On Bucks, editor emeritus Mitchell Maurer, the entire staff of Brew Hoop. You heard it, folks. The entire staff of Brew Hoop is scheduled to make an appearance on the podcast prior to the 2024-2025 season. We will go through our standard series of questions to help compare and contrast where everybody is feeling and where they are at with this team heading into the season. Without further ado, Jackson, it is your time to enter the interrogation room. And this is the part, this feature right here, folks. If you're not watching on YouTube, highly recommended. Both listen to it on podcast form, and then if it's so good, come back to watch it on YouTube. Check this out. We're going to switch up our first question, the banner change. Jackson, which new Buck are you most intrigued by going into this regular season?
You know, I think for the most part, you're probably going to hear a lot about Gary Trent. He was probably the most unexpected signing of the offseason. I'm gonna zig a little bit here. I'm gonna go with Torian Prince on this one. Just because like I'm curious to how much, like, I know he's just going to be a 3-and-D rotational wing at this point. I'm not expecting him to be like a top 5 scorer on this team. No one's going to be saying that. But I just wonder with like more playing time than he probably had on the Lakers at points last year. I'm just curious how well he can do with more consistent playing time. I'm not saying he's going to go back to Atlanta Hawks, Torian Prince, anytime soon. But I think he was an upgrade over Jay Crowder. I hate to say it as my Marquette brethren. But I think
we speak truth on this podcast. Let's just be honest about the situation.
We speak truth to power. That's what we do around here.
To Jay Crowder in particular, I guess. All right, continue.
But I think he can carve out a role that we were all hoping that Jay Crowder would when they traded for him and gave up 5 second-round picks, which is just bananas to think about at this point. I think he substantially raises the floor for what the Bucks are looking for in a rotational wing that they were getting out of Jay Crowder.
That's really interesting. I was waiting to see how many people would say Torian Prince, who is going to be the first Torian Prince. You are the first so far of the people I've interviewed. So this is now Jackson Gross's island. He is Torian Prince's biggest fan. You heard it here first on this podcast, folks. He definitely feels a lot more wild cardy about how he's going to fit in. So Gary Trent Jr., okay, we all understand he's here to do the Malik Beasley thing. DeLon Wright's bench guard, maybe he's a closer in certain situations for defense, kind of a bigger guard. Torian Prince, like, he has his lanes, but that lane that he fills is also really critical as an option to help spell you for a few minutes. Like Dame, he can run out there for a lot of time. Chris is the one guy that you're like, okay, he's going to have to dial back his minutes throughout the season, get to the playoffs. That'll ramp it up, but you're still going to need guys who can guard wings. Torian Prince can presumably do that. So I think low key, and I don't want to tip my hand on future questions here, but I think Torian Prince is an interesting pick, including the Darvin Ham connection. He's going to know how to use them. He obviously loved the guy. So I think that's also very interesting how the fit is going to go. So Torian Prince, why don't you get in touch with Jackson, or whenever you have your media availability, give Jackson a shout out. He's in your corner early this season. At least he's in your corner.
I'll make sure to tell him that on October 10th when they actually play the Lakers. So it'll be a nice little homecoming for everybody.
Torian Jackson Gross Brew Hoop, biggest fan of yours. That's keep working on that on what your delivery is going to be. Okay. So gosh. From Torian, the vet, we're going to go ahead. We're going to go young now. Next question for you. Which young buck, and I've defined it as a guy with 3 years or less experience, do you think will have the greatest impact on this season? Your primary group you're going to pick from is AJ Green, AJ Johnson, Andre Jackson Jr., Marjon Beauchamp, Chris Livingston, Tyler Smith. And I keep giving the option to people that don't take it yet, understandably. If you want to pick a two-way guy, the couple of the guys I don't even remember their names right now, mea culpa, you're welcome to, but maybe of those 6, who do you think realistically has a chance to have the biggest impact on the season?
When I was thinking about this one, it kind of reminded me of the first one, where I feel like there's a clear and obvious answer. And I think most people, especially Mr. Kyle, are going to go with AJ Green. But I'm going to go with Andre Jackson Jr. I think there were stretches last year where he showed some of what he can do. I think in certain instances, the 3-point shot was better than I was even anticipating it would be. Now, I don't want him chucking 5 threes a game at this point coming off the bench. But I think, and I don't know if they're going to do this, but I feel like they should. They should start running him a little bit as a point forward off the bench at this point, because that was pretty much one of his biggest part of his roles with UConn, is he was one of the big point forward guys. Obviously, they had Jordan Hawkins and a few other guys from that national championship team, but that was one of his big roles, was bringing the ball up, playing good defense, playing with energy, and playing with a lot of hops. So I think if they can start to incorporate that a little bit, obviously DeLon Wright's going to be the main ball handler off the bench in most instances, but I feel like giving him a little bit of run can probably unlock a little bit more of what Andre Jackson Jr. has to offer for the Bucks moving forward. And I think it's a key piece because he is one of the few young guys who I think could be a little bit more than what people think he is. I don't know if he'll be ever an all-star, but I think he could be a guy who plays for a decade and starts for most of that decade.
I'll do a quick follow-up before I kind of respond to that. Any concerns with how Summer League went? So he injured his hand. That I'm not talking about that. But the fact that he had the larger role in Summer League and kind of struggled with it a little bit, is there any concerns about that preceding it? Or do you think there's a way to give him that run and he'll be able to fit in with the veterans around him, depending on the lineup, that he can still function without showing a lot of those like extreme warts that we saw in Summer League?
Yeah, I think that was a good learning experience for him. I think that's just something young guys are going to have to go through, especially as like he was an early second round pick. He wasn't a lottery guy. He wasn't a mid first round guy. So those are just natural growing pains for a guy who has untapped potential. And like I said, I'm not expecting him to be the point forward off the bench for 7 or 8 minutes at a time. I just think there are small spurts in certain matchups where I think he could really take advantage of a team's smaller guard. I know DeLon Wright's a little bit of a bigger guard, but kind of just forcing that home. And you never know with injuries what can happen. So as long as you're incorporating that like they did in Summer League and letting him grow through it and eventually pushing that through the preseason and maybe stretches in the regular season, I think they might have something pretty good on their hands.
I really look forward to seeing what year 2 for him looks like, because AJ Green and Andre Jackson Jr. were the only young guys who really cracked the rotation. And again, emergency situation, injuries piled up, just needed to change of pace. I would not say Andre Ajax was excellent in the playoffs by any stretch of the imagination, but he was sort of force-fed some minutes during the season. Then it kind of went away from him, kind of came back a little bit at the end of the season. Okay, the playoffs, he finally has a little bit of or not finally, but he gets some playoff experience. How does he build off of all of that? Because AJ Green, I think, is the obvious answer that a lot of people will go here because you say, okay, here's this pretty reliable skill set. We'll see about the defense, but shooting gets you on the floor in the NBA, at least in the regular season. Whereas Ajax, there feels like there's still a lot of mystery box potential to him because of the athleticism, because of what we saw. So it's like I think it's a realistic answer to say there's a chance that because of his skill set and the fact that, like you said, injuries or just the rigors of the season, if he comes in and he looks decent in training camp and preseason, he could definitely put it together. There's a reason why he was such a clamored for player from a lot of people, not simply because we wanted more young guys to play, but because he was also exciting. He brought a change of pace to everything. So I think it'll kind of seem like an unorthodox pick compared to AJ Green, but I like the support on your part, Jackson, of Ajax. I think it's a reasonable selection here.
Yeah. And just last point, I think hopefully he'll have a little bit more of a defined role, because last year was just pure chaos between trading for Damian Lillard basically at the end of training camp and hiring a new head coach, having our favorite interim coach for a couple of games, and then Doc Rivers in for the rest of the season. I think for everybody, but I think Ajax especially, will be a good reset and redefinition of what is expected of him. And that goes off a lot off a guy's shoulders, and I think that'll be a big help for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back one more time real quick to the older guys. Then we're going to start getting to the ranking questions. So this is where you can start to piss people off if you like. First ranking question for you. I want you to rank the new free agent signings. In this case, we're talking about DeLon Wright, Gary Trent Jr. Sorry, Gary, and Taurean Prince, on how well they will fill the role they'll be given. Now, there's a little bit of interpretation on your part because we have I think most of us have a sense of the role they will have. But based on what you expect them to be asked to do during the season, who do you think will fill that role best? And who do you think will struggle the most to live up to the expectations?
I'm going to start from the bottom because lead a little bit of a surprise. But I'll start with the bottom. I know I just gushed about him, but
oh no.
But
Torian, don't turn off the podcast, Torian. Turn off the podcast. Hold on.
Yeah, so I put Torian Prince at third. I think he will have a solid role, but I just think obviously the other two guys are not only just better players in general, but I think they fill more important roles in just a rotational wing. But number two, I'm actually putting Gary Trent at number two, which means I'm putting DeLon Wright at number one for his role, because the backup point guard position last year was an absolute, unequivocal, undeniable tire fire for most of the year. Whether it was Cam Payne and his scrawny body not being able to shoot a lick, or Patrick Beverly being an asshole 99% of the time and chucking balls at people and telling people he can't interview with them unless he subscribes to the pod. And I wonder if he's saying that to the Israeli reporters now that he's in Tel Aviv.
I haven't followed that story, I have to admit, but yes, it's a good question. It's a fair question.
Quick sidebar. Did you hear what he said about like the guy who gave him the contract in the first place?
I did. And that's when I think I said in the chat, that is not my point guard. That's what I put in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. Not great.
Touch base on that.
Yeah, not good.
But, well, yes, Gary Trent will be a starter this year. I like what he can do. I think he can do what Malik Beasley did, but better. I think he'll be a marginally better defender, but I think that's all the Bucks need at this point at the two guard. And I think he's a little bit more athletic. I think 3-point shooting is relatively the same. Malik Beasley's been one of the best 3-point shooters in the league for a while, but I like Gary Trent. But I think with how much you've invested in Dame at this point, and he's creeping up in age, I'm not saying he can't handle a heavy workload, but I don't think you want to be shelling out 38 to 40 minutes in October and November and the early parts of December, when you would prefer those minutes be used for times in March, April, and May, and hopefully June at that point. So I think he's a substantial upgrade. I just think the biggest thing I've noticed with this crop of free agents is just calmness. There's not as much chaotic or wish thinking about what these guys could be. And I think the weaknesses they have aren't as glaring as the last crop, because like I said, I already said about Cam Payne and Patrick Beverly, but then even with Jay Crowder, with him losing all the steps that he did, I just think this just stabilizes the team. And after everything that happened last year, I think that's really important.
I'll follow up question on this. Do you envision, or do you see the world where, as the season's winding down, the playoff starts, assuming health, do you think DeLon Wright will be the guy that makes most sense to be in the closing lineup over Gary Trent Jr.?
That's a great question. I don't know if you put him in the closing lineup. I personally think if it's a 2-possession game with like 6 minutes left, I think you run him from the 6-minute to the 3-minute mark, and then you put in Gary Trent. I like DeLon Wright as a defender. I like him as a distributor, but I'm not entirely sold on his spacing. And in the playoff, spacing is everything. We saw that last year when Dame was out, and what the Bucks had to roll with overall, especially with having had Patrick Beverly and Jay Crowder and Pat, who lost a little bit in his shooting touch. So I don't see a world where he does that. but I think there's a world where he will play heavy minutes in the playoffs and play important minutes in the playoffs.
Yeah. I think it's interesting thinking if Gary Trent is here to fill the Malik Beasley role, which I think it's obvious that's what he's here to do. Like a lot of different shooters who are in that 2 spot, you start each playoff game and say, okay, you're going to get the first 6-7 minutes to see, are you on tonight or are you not? If you're not, we pull him. You got DeLon Wright, who's like a good safety blanket. He can do a little bit of everything without doing it like not excellent at a ton of stuff, but pretty good at a lot of the basic stuff, which is important. And then it's that tricky balance of when do you throw the shooter back out there to say, okay, try to get hot again. Let's see if you're good to go now. So it's a super push and pull, and that's why I don't get too bent out of shape about lineups until like later in the season or whatever. I mean, obviously, if there's something asinine happening, that's different. But it's super difficult in the moment to say, look, we really value this guy's shooting, but we can only run DeLon Wright out there so long. Like, what's that balance? It'll just be very curious to me. They could both have great seasons, and at the very end, it just kind of comes down to, is Gary Trent hitting his shots or not? And if he isn't, then the door opens a lot wider to that possibility of DeLon being in the closing lineups. But we'll kind of see how it works out. Okay. Next ranking question. This one's a little more controversial. I want you to rank these 3 guys in terms of their importance to the season. Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez.
Okay. This is a tough one. I think regardless, and I hate to say this because he was just Giannis's best man, I'm going to say of the 3, Chris Middleton is probably the least important. Simply for the fact that I think he's well defined in his role. He's a secondary scorer, secondary or even tertiary ball handler at this point. I think he is important, and he has come up clutch more times than I can count. But I just think with where Brook and Dame are, they are a lot more vital to the Bucks' success this year. And with that in mind, I'm actually going to say Brook is the most important. I'll put Dame at 2.
Interesting. Okay.
Obviously this got a little bit better when Doc Rivers.
All right. I'm going to clip that. We'll be sending that out as the as the preview for the podcast on the socials. Doc Griffin. Okay. Continue. I got you.
When Doc Rivers came around, the defense got a little bit better, marginally better. But we need to know if Brook Lopez is going to be anywhere close to his more productive self. I think this past season was a big step back, despite him playing as many games as he did. Yep. Just look slow, out of place, just bad. And not all of it is on him. It's hard when you don't have one of the best perimeter defenders in the league on your team anymore. Feel like he got basically treated as like a poor man's Rudy Gobert when Rudy was with the Jazz and they had no perimeter defenders.
A destitute man's Rudy Gobert. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think if he looks, not that he was out of shape by any stretch, but if he looks quicker, just looks overall better, looks more like himself, the Bucks will be in a much better spot. And then obviously with Dame, staying consistent with the shot. He was wildly inconsistent basically after the month of December. January and February were really, really rough months, minus the post All-Star break. March was decent. April was okay. And I mean, I wrote an entire article on Dame's season about just how inconsistent he was. And Van pointed this out in our chat that if he hadn't done what he did in the playoffs, it would have been a really, really bad look for Dame year 1 in Milwaukee. So he's got a lot to prove, which I think has been one of his biggest advantages when he ever has a chip on his shoulder. People are calling him washed. People are saying that Jalen Brunson's the best point guard in the East. So I think he's got a lot to prove this year. And if he can harness any sort of that, what I'll call Oakland energy, I think him and the Bucks will be in good hands.
I totally get all your points. I tend to agree with a lot of them. I think the other thing about putting Brook as most important is because of his age, because of the back injury. Now, he has been an Iron Man outside of that one season. So there's really, outside of just getting older and slowing down, there's not a lot of concern of like recurring injuries that will keep Brook out. But if something does keep Brook out, I mean, we are so SOL at the big rotation immediately. Tyler Smith, love you. I'm a believer. I'm not gonna make any wild proclamations. I am a long-term believer, but honestly, it's Giannis and Bobby. Giannis never wants to play center if he can avoid it, and typically you should really only use that for certain lineups anyways. And Bobby's just not like a good long-term centerpiece for obvious reasons. So even just looking at it from roster construction, and again, I think I said this with Mitchell, 50% of the floor, i.e. defense, is not completely, but largely predicated upon Brooks' availability and the way that you play him. Like you said, if you're using him as destitute man's Rudy Gobert, you're probably not going to be doing great and you might be out of a job soon. And if you're using him as you typically should, typically in zone drop, okay, you're giving yourself a chance and he's going to have to be the anchor. You build it around him. So for a lot of different reasons, Brook is the most important. He has been like the most important Buck that is not Giannis for almost since he showed up and showed how good he was when he first came to the Bucks. So there might be a little controversy in your answer, but I think it's also reasonable if you were to look at the facts of the situation. So okay, let's keep on talking about, well, I wouldn't necessarily call it a weakness, but like you said, redemption season for a lot of guys. Actually, you know what? Let's go back one question. I do got to ask, and this is between you and me and everybody listening to the podcast. And it's not, Adam won't listen to this podcast because he's busy with life stuff. Were you the one who voted for Brook Lopez as the guy you least like watching last season during the Golden Hoof Awards? If you don't want to answer, I respect it.
Wait,
okay, you didn't.
Did I?
Somebody voted Brook Lopez. I had to tell Adam that, and he was like, Adam was like, Brook is the most underrated Buck of all time.
Okay.
So
I cannot, and I'm not saying this because I did. I generally cannot remember. I can neither confirm nor deny that I voted for Brook Lopez.
Right. Brooke, that's bulletin board material. Even if Jackson did not confirm one way or another, just use it to inspire yourself to greatness. I just wanted to see if I could find out who voted for Brooke, because that cracked me up on that episode. Okay, here we go. Looking at the team. So we talked about the players, talked about new acquisitions, a couple of the guys that are here from seasons past. Looking at the team right now, what do you think the team's greatest weakness is? And this could be micro, like you said, I'm concerned about X player. It could be something macro, the way the team is constructed. It could even be something off the court. What do you look at the team and say, this still has me a little bit worried going to the season?
I think this even goes on like macro. I think this goes existential. Essentially, is Doc the right guy? I think that is, honestly, I don't even know if I want to call it a weakness. That is just my greatest fear for this season.
It's the greatest unknown. It's a big unknown. It's a huge unknown.
Yeah, because he looked okay, and it's hard for me to tell because I'm still trying to figure out how to even analyze him at this point as a head coach out with the Bucks. At least I could walk up and down his time with the Clippers and the 76ers as the continual playoff choker outside of having Kevin Garnett on his team. So it's hard to tell. I think he gets it. I think he can be the coach that they're looking for and why they fired Adrian Griffin in the first place. I just don't know. And that worries me, considering the pedigree that he has, the cachet he's developed within the league. The fact that we don't know is certainly frightening to me. Like there are certain instances where you have your head coach and there's varying arguments on how important a head coach actually is. I mean, outside of Tyronn Lue, ask any head coach for LeBron James. I just don't know about Doc because, like I said, the defense got marginally better, but the offense also got pretty worse, pretty bad. And part of that was injury, part of that was Dame going through his funk or whatever. But the drop off from being a top 3 to top 1 offense in offensive rating to middle of the pack to barely getting around 20th defensively is concerning.
I like the way that you put it, that Doc gets it, because like step one for a title contending team coach, especially one that has a lot of veterans, is you have to have a guy who gets it. Like Adrian Griffin had a lot of weaknesses. I think one of the biggest was that disconnect between himself and knowing how to really set the table, interact with, create an environment around his veterans. Like Doc has that on lock. I think it's now a quarter century, maybe a little bit over, that he's spent as a head coach in the NBA. Yes, he only has the one title, but he's been in the playoffs. Like the floor as a guy who gets it is step one, and we have that check marked. And the other things, though, like I would say in terms of playing style, I don't think of him necessarily as a guy who goes in with like a really strong identity. This is how we're going to play. Like Mike Budenholzer, not that he's wedded to one system, but he designed his system for the roster he had, and he just like more or less stuck with it as much as he could. I don't think Doc is at that same level, which has its pros and its cons in terms of like how high the floor is, but maybe the ceiling could be higher if he's more flexible. And like I said, we just, with this team, with this go around, because of the injuries, we didn't get the best look at what his rotations would be. If I was to think it's the last playoffs, I think my only complaint was like, man, we were really riding Bobby a lot while Bobby was shooting us out of games occasionally, but also, what are you going to do? Brooks the only other option. You can't have Jay Crowder be your small ball center necessarily. So at least Jay Crowder in this edition that we have. So it's a super fair question. I am proud to tell you that this is the second question that you have been the first person to answer, come up with a different answer for. So shout out to you too on this one. Totally reasonable. I think there's a reason why people had a lot of consternation about bringing him in when they did. Like, you get why they go with him in the situation they were, but you also understand why Kyle Carr is losing his mind and constantly stressed out about the situation. So, yeah, Doc Rivers, prove us wrong, please. I would love if he proved us wrong. I just, with all these coaches, you would love to just see everybody be healthy, to see what does it really look like. Like, it's just, that doesn't happen. And I guess you could also say that's, they have to adapt in a situation like that. And maybe he just didn't enough to the way he could, but also the roster was what it was. So good question, or good answer for this one. I think it is something that goes under the radar a little bit. Doc Rivers, he kind of feels like he's just part of, I won't say the furniture, but like he's just a rock solid, like he's going to be here no matter what. And it's easy then to overlook that guy if he's just going to be here no matter what.
He's I'll throw a little conspiracy hat into it. He's part of the deep state of the Milwaukee Bucks.
Future Pobo. He that was very I was cracking up when they hired him. I was like, John Horst let the what is it is in the, gosh, what's the word the wolf is in the hen house. He brought the wolf into the hen house. It's like, look, Docs is great at playing the organizational game, which I respect the hell out of, but that's dangerous to bring that guy into the mix because he's just a charismatic guy. Yep. I can imagine him being like cool to talk to. If you're like the owners, you're like, this guy gets it. Like I said, this guy gets it. You talk to him, it's like, this is awesome. This is Doc Rivers. So good luck to John Horst.
And hey, as a reporter side of it, he's a delight to talk to you. Let all those guys during All-Star Weekend, including myself, we're loving it.
I was telling Mitchell, or maybe I think it was Morgan, actually. I said, I think if I really tried, I wouldn't even have to try that hard. I could probably get Doc on the podcast to do like take part in this
100%.
preview series. If I email the right email, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll make time." So Doc, if you're listening, I know you are. The email is open. Reach out. You can come on Deer Diaries whenever you like. There is a microphone here, and I know how you are when you hop on the mic. You start freestyling, and everybody loves it. So we look forward to. He made post-game press conferences worth watching. Like even in like random games that really did not matter in the grand scheme of things, you'd be like, "I'm just gonna go listen to Doc to see what kind of stuff he says tonight." Just, even if it's nonchalant stuff, he just says it in a very entertaining way. So
yeah,
let's hope
the hotel story with him still living out of a hotel and like watching film during the snowstorm in Indianapolis is hilarious.
He had a lot of great experiences, even in his very short time with the Bucks. So hopefully, let's go make some memories, Doc. Some memories worth remembering. Okay, next one. Speaking of random games that you sometimes don't want to tune into, as members of the staff of Brew Hoop, we have the obligation to cover all 82 plus games of the Milwaukee Bucks during a season. You actually go and you attend the games as a member of the media in Milwaukee and elsewhere as well. So you watch the game. Sometimes you don't want to. In the past, it was always be that Tuesday road game in Orlando in February that you wouldn't want to watch. Now it's a Tuesday road game in Washington, D.C. I want to ask you, Jackson, what's one thing the Bucks could do this season that would make tuning in worthwhile for you? So the question is couched as something you hope to see the Bucks doing during the regular season is blank. I want you to think of it as this would be something that would keep me tuning in or something that I would find like interesting and worthwhile following.
I think for me, and this is more of just a personal goal I want them to hit for them to actually play well, and I'd like to see it. I want them to finish top 5 in assists per game, and essentially to say, I want to see them pass the ball and maintain a consistent effort. Though, if they do that, if they are an even steady team with obviously their highlight moments from time to time, because you're going to get that when you have 2 top 15 players on your roster. But I just need to see some sort of consistency out of this team. Like, I don't want to see you one game get blown out by 40 against the Cavs and then 3 weeks later win by 25 against the Cavs. Like,
Yep.
Or I don't want to see you blow a game against Portland or nearly blow a game against Portland and then go out. Or no, it wasn't even that. Nearly blow a game against Brooklyn one game and then dominate the 1 seed in the Oklahoma City Thunder the next. Like, I want them to still dominate the OKC Thunder. That would be great, especially since they have my bald king, Alex Caruso, now. But I cannot go through sweating out, covering a game, seeing them sweat out against, I don't even know, Matisse Thybulle and the Portland Trailblazers.
What's that team that's just south of Milwaukee? Which team is that?
The
the Chicago Bulls. Yeah. Let's not sweat out games against the Bulls, for example. Just throwing out a team, just throwing out a name.
Especially this year with no more DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso, basically two of the 3 players who actually cared about winning on a consistent basis. Goddamn Vucevic and Drummond.
We're moving in on Lockdown Bulls' turf right now. I assume there's a Lockdown Bulls. We're moving into their turf right now.
There is. I don't watch them, but I watch some other stuff, and it's pretty much the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I just need to see some sort of consistency in the fact that beat up on the bad teams. You don't have to like win by 25 all the time, but if you want to win by 10 or 15 against those teams, that's fine. But I don't want to see it come down to a buzzer beater against, and there's no offense, they made the play-in. I don't want to see it come down to an overtime buzzer beater against Sacramento. Like, save those overtime buzzer beaters for New York, Boston, OKC, Denver, Dallas.
Super fair point. I think selfishly as people who cover the team, when you got that rapid recap or even the full recap and you're writing as you go, you're like, okay, I kind of get a sense of where this is going to go. And then they just consistently hang on by the skin of their teeth or lose by the skin of their teeth late. And you're like, okay, I'm going to have to rewrite about 3/4 of this article in the context of them losing this game out of nowhere, or making it way more competitive than it had any right to be.
Man, this wasn't even like in a nail biter sense, but that game in April against the Knicks where they were up by 12 at half and got basically blown out. That obviously was the most recent game I covered, but that was still the most annoying change of a recap I've ever had to do.
Because you were probably flying a little bit high. You're like positive and and then oh man. And I know nobody who listens who is not part of the site really cares about how annoying it is for us to have to do that. But trust me, folks, if the rapid recap is late going up, there's a chance that it's because we had, why. There's a chance we had one whole article written and then you had about 5 minutes to rewrite a whole different article based on the way the Bucks played. So selfishly, and then I just recall, like, we had the whole first half of the season, the Adrian Griffin era, let's just call it. And we're winning, but none of the wins are like super feel good. You're like, oh, we're really crushing teams a lot. It's like, it feels a little fake. I don't know. I don't know about this. So I second your motion, if only because I want those games against the random crappy teams to be not nights where I'm like, oh, I hope this isn't ugly basketball. I hope we're not just like barely hanging on. Like if any team gets super hot and like shoots whatever 55-60% from three, it is what it is. But in a lot of those games, there's just like, we're just not really playing up to the potential of what the team could, and it just makes it really hard as a viewer at home to watch. It's just not fun in February to be watching them loaf around against like the Nets or the Wizards or whoever it is. So at least do it in like convincing fashion so we can see some young guys or whatever. Like there's definitely a lot of different avenues. You have the talent, you have the capability to do this.
Yeah. I just hope, and I will classify it as this. I hope they avoid the first half, like you said, like the fake first half with Adrian Griffin, which I'm going to classify as the Kim Kardashian first half of a season, for obvious reasons. Let's just hope that doesn't happen. But yeah,
I have high hopes. Maybe they'll dash it for me right away. We'll see. All right. Let's go into next spring and summer. This is a relatively straightforward one. In order for the Bucks to win a title this season, they must blank. And the only qualifier that I ask my guests not to answer is win 16 games, because I expect more of my guests on this educated podcast. So any answer but that, you're more than welcome to go for.
Okay, how about in totality between the regular season and playoffs, they win 66 games.
There you go. Okay, that's pretty good. But Mitchell, wise guy. He was like, they must win 4 playoff series. I was like, I don't know why I have any of you people on the podcast. So,
but on the real, for me, bring the defense back to top 10-ish for the entire year. I don't expect them to be top 5. I personally think they don't have the personnel for it outside of Giannis, Brook, and a little bit of DeLon, and whatever spurts Ajax gets. But in order to win a title, and again, this goes full circle back to the chaos of last year and being more consistent this year, you have to start out and maintain at least somewhere close to the top 10. You can't go from being 25th to then move up to 18th at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You can maybe start in the middle of the pack, start the year, figure things out, sort all your new pieces in actual games. But once late December, or I don't even say mid-December hits, you really start to hit the ground running with the defense, and it has to be somewhere close to the top 10, because there were just too many games where the Bucks were giving up way too many points, both with Griffin and Doc. to teams that they shouldn't be. Like the last 2 games of Griffin against the Pistons come to mind as 2, or I think the game in Portland against Portland, they gave up a ton of points. The Knicks are good, but they gave up way too many points, especially to Jalen Brunson. So, and those are just a few that are coming to mind off the top of my head. So, if they can find a way, again, be consistent on the defensive end, stay in touch. I'm going to use a cross-country racing coaching mantra, staying in touch, staying in contact with that top 10-ish spot. I think it will pay big dividends for them this year.
I like that pick. I agree. And I can't remember end of season numbers if it reflected the fact that they were so bad, especially at defense at the rim. And if you can see it on the eye test, like the number of times Brook Lopez was just like put in hell because he was either way out of position or his perimeter defense was so bad that there wasn't even time for him to like recover. And again, part of that is his aging as well. But when you at home can tell like, oh, this thing about the defense is broken, that's a bad thing because defense in the NBA is like the hardest thing for people at home, unless it's of course like a super obvious blown coverage. Like it's the hardest thing for the average person to understand or even quantify at home. So when you see signs like that throughout the season, you're like, oh, that's why it's so bad. Like I see the end product. We were typically such a good interior defensive team. And then all of a sudden it goes out the window. You're like, okay, I mean, that's really hard to come back from, especially with Dame playing down to below expectations that he had coming into the season. Chris injured, like, all the components were together, all make sense with how the season ended. So I think defense getting that as the priority back up totally makes sense. Totally agree. And I'm hopeful. Again, it's another thing. There will be time to sort it out, but I think we'll have a pretty good sense of it relatively quickly in the season. Like, are we moving in the right direction? Even if we're not fully there, like you said, by December, mid-December, are we at least moving in the right direction compared to last season?
Totally agree.
Then that's brings us to the final question. This one, a little bit free answer. I'm not asking for what you think the final record is going to be, though you're welcome to say that if you like, if you did enough research to write that down. But I want you to predict the team's finish in the East and how far they go in the playoffs. This is a completely unfair question because you have no idea about people's health. You don't know how other teams are going to gel, but we're in the business of prognostication, though we're not in the business of sports gambling. So just say what you think the finish in the East, how far they go in the playoffs.
I think they will once again finish third in the East. I have Boston and New York ahead of them. Boston is a juggernaut of a team that is basically spending $1 billion on this roster, at least what it seems like over this totality. So they are in a great spot. And then I think the Knicks, I think they're a little bit more well put together, even with losing Isaiah Hartenstein to the Thunder. And I think it will take a little bit longer than we're hoping for the Bucks to figure it out. But I think once they do, I think they're a lock for a top 4. I think honestly they're a lock for a top 3. I know everyone's going nuts for Paul George and Philly, but all they've done is basically added another playoff choker to a team of playoff chokers at this point. Indiana could do something. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to improve on last year. Last year was a really, really good year for them, especially making it to the conference finals. Man, honestly, I just don't think there's a lot of other teams in the East that could really even threaten for a top 4 because Miami's weird. I think that's just the best way you can put it. Bulls are going to fall off. You know who the bottom feeders are going to be. Who knows what Atlanta does? I think they could be like 2 months away from trading Trae Young. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. The Cavs still have the too big thing to figure out. Still kind of a weird roster fit, roster construction.
Yeah, and so you just don't know. And I think with the talent the Bucks have, I think they're a lock for a top 3. And I know I've done a lot of hemming and hawing and concerning with everything that I think could go wrong with this team. But considering where the NBA is at and the lack of a genuine like powerhouse team, maybe you want to throw in Boston, but I think they're still a very beatable team. They had, and I will repeat this, a Mickey Mouse run to the finals with basically every team's best player getting hurt along the way. I don't remember who they played in the first round, but Jalen Brunson got hurt in the second round against the Knicks. Tyrese Halliburton got hurt in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then Dallas was just such a poor matchup that they just couldn't get anything going. So I'm going to say it here, and I'm assuming I'm probably the first one. I have the Milwaukee Bucks win the 2025 NBA title.
You are the first one. That's 3 answers that you've laid the first claim to. That's awesome. Okay. I like the positivity. I don't think it's super unreasonable. I mean, chop up this clip and send it to me at the end of the season when they fall out of the first round again. But I kind of believe a little bit too. I mean, I have no choice. I have to believe to a certain extent. Otherwise, why am I tuning in? But I think there's definitely a possibility. I just hope they have the health to stick there. I just want to see healthy Giannis.
Yeah.
Healthy Giannis, healthy Dame. Let's just see what it looks like in the playoffs. I think even if they don't advance or as far as they would like I have to imagine it would be entertaining or at least like worthwhile basketball to watch. So I think that's an X factor, and you need X factors to win titles, and the Bucks have for sure 1, if not 2, plus everybody else around them, which seemed like a decent fit. So okay, beautiful. I love that.
That Chris to Dame to Giannis lob over Kristaps Porzingis in Game 7 Eastern Conference Finals going to hit like crack.
Okay, all right. Hey, okay. I don't know. There's literally no moving off of that point. So thank you, Jackson. That was poetic. I was gonna ask you this quick follow-up because you wear your heart on your sleeve so much. I was gonna ask if you have any Golden Eagles in the NBA update. I'll be honest, I didn't watch a lot of Phoenix Suns Summer League ball. Any reports on how Tyler and Oso did, or
I didn't get really a chance to see much on how Oso did. I think he had some solid plays in Summer League. He actually was back in Milwaukee for Marquette volleyball. Right. The last time I checked, they were up 1-0 on number 13 Kansas. So hope once again another Marquette team upsets Kansas. As for Tyler, he had a pretty spectacular summer league. Although I would like to file a formal police report against Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart for bullying Tyler about and asking if he was illiterate or not.
On their podcast?
Yep.
I know they're on a... Whoa. Was he on the podcast? Why did this come
No,
up?
he was not. It was mainly in a joking manner. This has been like spiraled from his time at Marquette by like a Providence fan into like this big meme.
Okay,
but
all right. Shout out Providence. Continue. Go on.
I'm not gonna say what I would normally say, but it's always thumbs down on Providence.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I just don't like them. They're annoying.
Yeah, they're not cool. Okay.
No, I like the Northeast Big East fans suck.
Okay. Hold on. All right. Okay. Rewind. Get back to how the story started. Sorry, I don't want to go too far off the beaten path here.
Some fan like made up some stupid stuff that Tyler Kolek couldn't read, and then in response, in response, Tyler like posted his transcript that he got like a good grade in like a writing class or something. And then there was like this parody account like during the NCAA tournament that was saying like he was academically ineligible because he was illiterate. And then someone from Marquette's office, like I don't know if it's the athletic office or something like that, responded and like got angry with them and saying it wasn't true.
I'm crying now. I'm literally crying on the podcast.
And so I'm not even kidding. Josh Hart legitimately asked on the podcast, Can he read? And Jalen was like, what the hell are you talking about?
Whew.
So,
Oh my God.
yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. I didn't expect that to be my Golden Eagles in the NBA update, but I'm really glad I threw that in there last second. That was so worthwhile. Oh my God.
And this was like during summer league, so this was obviously a little bit ago, but
Yes, okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let's hope he tears it up in the league to redeem himself. Not that he has anything to redeem, obviously, because we believe that he can read. But that is very good. I appreciate you did an awesome job summarizing all the main actors and the flow of events there. So thank you, Jackson. That was great. And we'll make this a recurring segment throughout the season when you're on. We'll give you your NBA Golden Eagle segment so that you can pontificate about your favorite guys in the NBA.
Okay, sounds good.
Is it one follow up? Is it over for Jay Crowder? Is it done?
I think he's still a free agent, so probably. I think
cool.
I think he should retire, get his jersey number retired at Marquette, and call it a day on his basketball career.
Are there any other Marquette players in the NBA right now besides Jay? If you can
oh gosh, not that I.
What's his face in Dallas? I mean, he's a two-way guy, right?
No, he's not.
Prosper.
Omax. He was their first round pick last year. How could I forget? I literally have interviewed him. What is wrong with me?
They didn't use him much last season, so that's okay.
No, they didn't. I think that's. I think is Wes still around?
He was with the Hawks.
Yeah, I think he was. I don't know if he signed with anybody, but shout out Wes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's still a couple of guys out there. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll keep it up as a segment. I think that was a very promising start. I don't know if any other Golden Eagle update will be able to live up to that one. That was a very worthwhile one, so I'm glad I asked. Okay, here we go. That wraps up all the questions. Thank you, Jackson, for going through the grilling. A lot of good answers, a lot of original answers. Not to criticize anybody else who's come on the podcast before, but the bar has been raised. For all my other guests who are listening to this and haven't been on the podcast yet, the bar has been raised. And we're going to raise the bar one last time. Hop over to miscellaneous. This is the most visual of all the miscellaneous subjects that we have. It's Jackson's build. Folks, this is the point at which I encourage you, if you are not watching on YouTube, I would turn it off. It's only going to be the very end of the podcast. Hop over. We're at the 56-minute mark. Head over to the YouTube and see what Jackson has got. I'm going to make Jackson main screen here, if I can figure it out. Solo layout. And he's going to show us Jackson's build this week.
Okay. I do have a slight addition to this because it's some point in August. It's getting very foggy at this point. I went to my second comic book convention. And I dressed up. If you look at my Twitter or Instagram, there's pictures of me in an Anakin Skywalker costume. But the reason I wanted to caveat that is that I bought my first lightsaber. So.
Ooh, cool.
So, very happy with it.
That's awesome. It looks great. Is the design, the build, is it authentic to like whatever it would have been in the movie, or is this supposed to be Anakin's lightsaber technically, or what?
No, this was just it was a mystery box lightsaber. To get his actual one was like going to be like $400 or $500.
You're good.
I was like, yeah, I'm good. But this is like I upgraded for like the heavy duty metal, so this is a really good quality metal. It's got some nice sounds to it. You can even do this with it too.
Oh, that's cool.
Money very well spent.
Were you hoping for a red lightsaber, or were you happy that it was blue?
I am happy with blue. I would have kind of flipped out if it was green in like the best way possible. Just because it's a different color, but almost all my favorite Jedi have blue lightsabers anyway. So, but speaking of green, we'll get to the actual build now. This is a diorama set from Return of the Jedi, Episode 6, of Vader and Luke's fight on the rebuilt Death Star with Palpatine in the back. You can't see him. So it's not it wasn't the most difficult build. Honestly, the fun part was obviously this big curved structure here with the window in the back. And yes, there's like a little bit of plastic, so it is kind of like a window. If you're wondering, yes, the chair, hold on, kind of moves. It spins.
That's cool. Yeah, it spins.
So as I knocked
just knocked over. Sorry, Emperor. My bad.
Sorry, Papa Palps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean this was a fun one. I'm mainly happy because I got green lightsaber Luke and another Darth Vader to add to my collection. I have blue lightsaber Luke for an X-wing I did like a year ago or 2 years ago. So yeah, this was fun. I just like it. It's a good display piece. Obviously, that's what it was made for. And it just brings, I have it on my desk next to the walker that I showed the last time I was on. It just brings me joy to look at it. And I think that's true with all my Legos, but this one especially, I watched the first 6 movies when I was a kid, and I can go back to episode 6 anytime and watch it without even watching the other 2. So I just like conclusions. So very near dear place to my heart. I would give this an 8 out of 10 Lego bricks, if I had to be honest. I've had more fun with some of the other builds, but this has a good place in my heart.
It's very aesthetically pleasing. I got to ask. So it looked like the base had like some of the decals on the front. Did it come with that like the black base portion that you built up on top of it, or did you add the decals, or was that like the decals that came with it?
These decals were already on here, and if you there's a quote on one of them, if you couldn't see, it's from Luke. It says, "I am a Jedi like my father before me." All this was already pre-done on here. It's one of the few ones I didn't have to put stickers on anything, which I think for a set like this is very. It puts your mind at ease, because sometimes trying to get the stickers on just right is a pain in the ass. So, and then you notice it and it bothers you. So but yeah, overall, very fun.
Well, that's awesome. It's easily and this is, again, don't tell Kyle, but it's probably my favorite of the miscellaneous segments we do, just because they're always interesting. I mean, so far we've had you go through it quite a number of times. You've always had something. Are we going to reach a point at which we're going to run out and we're going to have to either force you to buy more, or
I actually still have a few more that I don't think I've shown yet. I won't spoil them, obviously, but I think there's still a few around here somewhere in my room that I haven't shown yet. So
good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that we'll keep the people coming back, though.
You don't have to twist my arm to ask me to buy more. You don't have to twist my arm to do that.
Well, the people on the podcast are demanding. Both the people on the podcast and the people listening to the podcast are demanding. So thank you for showing us that. Yeah. Awesome. Again, recommend switch over to YouTube. Check it out. Really cool. All the Jackson's builds are on YouTube, and you can get a good look at what he has got going. So with that, we're going to wrap it up there. Jackson, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you, if not at Brew Hoop? Are there other places they can find you if they would like to follow your work?
So yeah, I am still on the Muskrat app at J Gross Bucks. I write about NFL, MLB. I host my own podcast as well about Major League Baseball for all my baseball homies out there.
What's it called? Plug the name.
Beer versus Ivy. I host it with a friend of mine who is a diehard St. Louis Cardinals fan. I am a diehard Chicago Cubs fan. Beer for Busch Stadium, Ivy for Wrigley Field. The name writes itself. 10 out of 10. Every Monday at noon, we try and go live, but with my hectic schedule and the fact that a whole bunch of other stuff, we haven't been able to the last couple of weeks, but we promise. And then I just put out a whole big article ranking all 32 NFL quarterbacks. So for all my football homies out there watching Eagles Packers right now, you can read that at halftime. It's 31 minutes long, over 8,000 words about your favorite and least favorite starting quarterbacks. So,
folks, he puts in the work. He's the hardest working man on the staff of brewhoop.com. We appreciate Jackson Gross's time, as we always do. We look forward to having him back during the regular season as well. we're going to wrap it up there. You can follow us, both of us, and everybody else at brewhoop.com. We have our Monday morning media roundup. Wednesday weekly wrap up will start up again soon. A lot of off-season content, good off-season content. Roundtables coming up, preseason coming around the corner. All that and much more at Brew Hoop. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again very soon.